Good evening. I'm Angie Brenner, the City Librarian for Mill Valley. Welcome to the first in our series of First Friday events, part of a year-long celebration of our library's centenary. Before giving a brief introduction, I'd like to express my deep appreciation for the exceptionally talented and dedicated staff of the library who are standing tonight. They are volunteering so they could attend this event and help out without taking up seats. I would also like to thank the Friends of the Library, without whose commitment and generosity this event would not be possible. Daniel Ellsberg will speak for about an hour, after which he will field questions from the audience. Following the Q&A, you're all invited to stay for a wine reception made possible by Mill Valley Market and an anonymous staff donation. This is pretty easy. Okay. When we first approached Dr. Ellsberg, we could not have known that we would soon be awash in a tidal wave of divulged classified information known as the WikiLeaks. Many of us may have noted in our reactions to this event a certain nonchalance, even cynicism. It isn't that we are unmoved, that we are not angered by depictions in these top secret documents of everything from gossipy political catfighting to nuclear brinksmanship reminiscent of the Cold War. Rather, we simply feel no surprise. And in place of surprise is a sense of déjà vu. We've seen this before. We've heard this before. We've been here before. 4 decades ago, our illustrious guest leaked to the East Coast media and select congressional leaders a collection of 7,000 clandestine documents detailing a quarter-century's worth of deceit, villainy, and corruption at the highest levels of government. The Pentagon Papers revealed to us not only that the Vietnam War was an unwinnable and depraved tragedy, but that we, the American public, had been hideously betrayed by the very statesmen in whom we had placed our absolute trust, that the firmest principles of our way of life and our most prized freedoms had been utterly traduced. However courageous and selfless that act of civil disobedience now strikes us, Dr. Ellsberg himself has been quick to remind us in interviews, public appearances, articles, books, that it was not some divine inner pacifism that drove him. Even if the courageous example of others prompted him finally to act, what changed his mind was information. It was what he read, it was what he found in documents obtained by illicit means, and it was information that should have been available to all of us as citizens of a presumably democratic and open society. Dr. Ellsberg, through that historic act and in his person, because he continues to advocate for transparency in the conduct of our public institutions, serves as a reminder, an enduring symbol, that it is access to the truth that will keep us free. Surely, the delightful irony of our meeting here, in a public library, an institution whose very essence is, whose very existence is predicated upon free and equal access to information, cannot be lost on anyone in this audience. On that note, I would like you to join me in welcoming to the Mill Valley Public Library, Dr. Daniel Ellsberg.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I just asked, actually, if the Pentagon Papers are in the library. I hope they are. If so, something that I just learned last week, actually, is that they're still classified, top secret in the eyes of the government. You know, they exist on library shelves all over the place. They were in the New York Times. But and there have been several requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, to declassify them. And they have never been declassified. They're still top secret. And that has some implications for any of you who might check them out, actually. Come to later. But if you are, for instance, a member of the U.S. government, the executive branch, or a family member of such a person, then her spouse or father or whoever it is may well have received notification just in the last few weeks that that person is forbidden to download from their office or home computer not only the WikiLeaks site or any of the documents that are on it, classified documents, but the New York Times, with any of the stories that are designated as classified and that are in the New York Times and all the other papers, which raises some very interesting questions. They can't do it on their home computers. They can't download it. And the law under which they're operating here, this is a government regulation, not a criminal law, but their clearance is at stake, as they pointed out. And it would seem to apply then to their, without authorization, showing any of those documents to any members of their family, handing the New York Times to a member of the family, or having a member of the family hand it to them. All these people, the member of the family, though not having a clearance, under the Espionage Act as interpreted by Obama's Department of Justice, would be a person unauthorized to receive this classified information, who is transmitting it without authorization to another person not authorized to receive it, and is violating that act, which is, each act of that is worth 10 years in prison. Now, that may well seem absurd, maybe it is absurd, but it is also so clearly a violation of the First Amendment, so enormous an infringement of free speech or of the press, that the Supreme Court should, and past Supreme Courts would, have declared that part of the law unconstitutional, unconstitutionally overbroad, is the technical term, legally. Now, the Supreme Court has never actually addressed that question. No case of a leak has ever actually gone up to the Supreme Court and been addressed and confirmed. So, Obama is using, then, in prosecutions he's been bringing, the indictments, and the indictment they're looking at for Julian Assange, an act of extremely questionable constitutionality. It's not impossible that the current court would decide otherwise, and probably Obama's Department of Justice hopes for that, to get a case up there, finally, which the Supreme Court will say this is properly addressed under the Espionage Act, even though it's well known that the act was not intended to deal with leaks to the public, to unauthorized disclosures. It was intended to deal with espionage, with spies. But the language of these two particular provisions, 18 U.S.C. 793 D and E paragraphs, do lend themselves to an enormously broad set of prosecutions, such as I've just described to you. Now, a less absurd-looking prosecution was for the Pentagon Papers. What almost nobody knows is that was the first prosecution of a leak in this country. And the reason that my prosecution with Tony Russo was the first after 40 years or so after the law had been passed, even though leaks occurred every week, often every other day, and still are. Mine was the first was because, for the reason I've just given, the law was not intended for that purpose, and was always assumed that if it were used for that, it would be found unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So they had refrained from ever bringing such a leak prosecution. After my case was dismissed for government misconduct, so it didn't lead to a decision of any sort, didn't go to an appellate court, two other presidents before Obama brought prosecutions for leaks under the same charges. One of them was for Samuel Loring Morrison, the grandson of naval historian Samuel Eliot Morrison, who did plead guilty and had a 20-month sentence, of which he spent 8 months in prison. He was the single person ever prosecuted for a leak.